Chosen one. Pause before you hear another word. What I am delivering today is not a promise of miracles, not a prediction about a soulmate, and not a warning about some last chance slipping away. This is something more direct and far more necessary. What God is saying to you right now is not a final verdict. It is a foundation. And foundations never look like the finished structure. Stay awake to what is about to be spoken. You woke up this morning carrying something you cannot quite name. There is movement inside your life, but no clear direction attached to it. Plans shift. Doors close without explanation. Prayers go up, and the answers do not come back in words. They come back in pressure, in waiting, in silence that stretches longer than you expected. You look around and other people seem settled. Their careers have shape. Their relationships have clarity. Their next steps are visible and well lit. Meanwhile, you are standing in the middle of something that does not yet have a label, and that gap between what you see in others and what you experience in yourself has started to whisper a dangerous question. Am I falling behind? Some of you have gone further than that. You have started asking whether God is punishing you, whether the silence means you took a wrong turn somewhere, whether the pressure is evidence that you are failing a test you did not know you were taking. I need you to hear what I'm about to say because it will reframe everything you have been interpreting. What you are calling stuck, God calls laying ground. What you are reading as delay, heaven reads as structural work. The confusion you feel is not a sign that the plan has failed. It is a sign that the plan is operating at a depth you were not designed to see yet. Foundations are never visible from the outside. No one walks past a construction site during the digging phase and says, "That looks beautiful." They see dust. They hear noise, they see disruption, but every building that stands through storms began in a season nobody wanted to photograph. There is a critical difference between something being final and something being foundational. And most of the suffering chosen ones carry comes from reading a foundational season with final language. Final means it is over. Final means the verdict has been delivered. Final means there is no more room. That is how the world interprets difficulty. But God does not design endings that look like this. When God ends something, there is clarity. When God is building something, there is confusion. And confusion is not cruelty. It is construction. Think about that slowly. If what you're experiencing were truly the end, it would feel settled. Empty, perhaps, but settled. Instead, it feels restless, unfinished, like something is forming underneath you but has not broken the surface yet. That restlessness is not anxiety. It is the hum of a foundation being poured in real time. You are not standing at the end of a road. You are standing in the basement of a tower you cannot yet see. The architect has not abandoned the blueprint. The architect is simply working on the part of the structure that must be completed before anything visible can rise. And that part, the underground part, the unseen part, is always the most critical. Consider a seed. When it is buried in soil, it does not know what kind of tree it will become. It only knows two things. It is dark and it is tight. But dark and tight are not death. Dark and tight are the exact conditions required for roots to form. And roots always come before the trunk, always before the branches, always before the fruit anyone can see. You are in the soil right now, not because you were discarded there, because you were planted. There is a difference between being buried and being planted, and the difference is entirely about intention. When something is buried, the goal is to hide it permanently. When something is planted, the goal is to grow it into something that could not exist without that season underground. So the heaviness you carry is not pointless weight. It is root pressure. It is the feeling of something inside you pushing deeper before it pushes upward. And I know that pushing deeper does not feel like progress. It feels like sinking. But in the economy of God, depth always precedes height. What grows tall without growing deep first will not survive the first serious wind. Here is where I need your attention to sharpen. This is not a motivational idea. This is an architectural reality. Every dimension of pressure you are experiencing, the financial tightness, the relational silence, the professional uncertainty, each one is a specific section of foundation being laid for a specific part of what is coming. The pressure is not random, it is targeted. And targeted pressure from an architect who knows exactly what the building needs to hold is not punishment, it is precision. You have been reading this season with the wrong dictionary. Today we begin correcting that, not with comfort, not with vague reassurance, but with the actual blueprint. And if you are willing to see it, everything shifts. Because once you understand that you are not at the end but at the base, the weight does not disappear, but it finally makes sense. And weight that makes sense is weight you can carry. Now, there is something deeper you need to understand. If this is a foundation, then someone drew the plans. And that is where we go next. Because knowing you are being built is one thing. Knowing who is building you changes everything. If this is a foundation being laid, then the most important question is not why it is happening. The most important question is who designed it. Because random suffering and designed pressure produce completely different outcomes. Random suffering breaks people down without purpose. Designed pressure builds people up towards something specific. And the difference between the two is not found in the intensity of the pain. It is found in whether there is an architect behind it. Most chosen ones are carrying a story right now that sounds something like this. I am trying, but no one sees it. I am doing the right things, but the results keep coming out wrong. People around me seem to invest less effort and receive more reward. And I'm not saying that story is false. The pain inside it is real. The frustration is legitimate. The exhaustion is not imagined. But that story, as true as it feels, is incomplete. It describes what is happening on the surface without explaining what is happening underneath. And what is happening underneath is architecture. Here is the reframe I need you to sit with. If what you are going through were random, it would be chaotic. It would hit from every direction without pattern or rhythm. But if you look carefully at the pressure you are carrying, it is not scattered. It is concentrated in specific areas: relationships, finances, solitude, waiting. Those are not random categories of suffering. Those are specific load-bearing walls in the structure God is building inside you. The pressure is not everywhere. It is exactly where the reinforcement needs to go. And precision like that does not come from accident. It comes from an architect who knows what the finished building needs to hold. Think about this image for a moment. An architect never explains the blueprint to the materials. Brick does not get a meeting where someone walks it through the floor plan. Brick does not know why it was placed in the basement instead of the facade. Brick only knows that it was picked up, positioned, and pressed into place. But the architect knows exactly why that brick is in that location. The architect knows what is going above it, what weight it will carry, and what role it plays in the integrity of the entire structure. You are not missing purpose right now. You are missing the vantage point of the one who designed you. And that is not a flaw in your faith. That is the nature of being material in the hands of a builder who sees the completed version. I want you to try something quietly in your mind right now. Think about the most difficult thing you went through 3 years ago. not the mild inconveniences, the thing that genuinely pressed you, the season that felt like it might not end. Now ask yourself this: did that experience teach you something you are actively using today? Did it build a tolerance, a discernment, a steadiness that you did not have before it happened? If the answer is yes, and for most of you it will be, then you just identified the fingerprint of the architect. You just saw evidence that what felt purposeless in the moment was actually structural. And here is what matters most. The pressure you are living through right now will have the same answer 3 years from now. You simply are not standing far enough in the future to see it yet. There is a fundamental difference between a victim and a construction project, and it changes everything about how you carry your days. A victim asks, "Why is this happening to me?" A construction project asks, "What is this building in me?" A victim waits for circumstances to change before they feel peace. A construction project waits for the interior to be completed, knowing that the exterior will follow. A victim measures progress by visible results and outside validation. A construction project measures progress by internal stability and the quiet confidence that comes from being shaped by hands that do not make mistakes. This is not about pretending the pain does not exist. This is about placing the pain inside a framework that gives it meaning. Suffering without framework destroys people. Suffering inside a framework produces veterans. And God has never once built someone significant without first taking them through a season that made no sense to anyone watching from the outside. Abraham waited decades for a promise that could have been fulfilled overnight. Joseph spent years in a prison after doing the right thing. David was anointed king and then sent back to sheep. None of those timelines made sense from the outside, but the architect was not building for spectators. He was building for legacy. And legacy requires a depth of foundation that shortcuts cannot produce. So here is what I need to settle in your spirit before we move forward. You are not a victim of random events. You are a project under the hands of the most deliberate builder in existence. The delays are not neglect. The silence is not absence. The pressure is not punishment. Every single element of this season has a placement on the blueprint, even if you have not been shown the full drawing yet. And the architect who began this work has never once abandoned a project halfway through. What he starts, he finishes, and he started you. But being built requires one thing that most people are terrified of. It requires silence, not the silence of abandonment. The silence of deep surgical work where no one speaks because what is happening is too precise for interruption. And that is exactly where we are going next. Most of us were trained to believe that silence means something is wrong. If someone stops talking to you, you must have offended them. If God does not answer your prayer the way you expected, you must have prayed incorrectly. If a room goes quiet when you walk in, you must not be welcome there. That conditioning runs deep, and it did not come from God. It came from a world that is terrified of empty space. A world that fills every gap with noise, not because the noise has value, but because silence forces people to sit with themselves. And sitting with yourself is the one thing most people will do anything to avoid. But here is what the architect knows that the world does not. Silence is not absence. Silence is the environment where the most precise work gets done. Think about a surgery room. No one holds casual conversation during an operation, not because the people in the room do not care. Because what is happening on the table requires absolute focus and zero distraction. When God goes silent on you, He has not left the room. He is operating on something inside you that is too delicate and too important for noise to be present. The silence you have been sitting in is not punishment. It is a sterile field, and sterile fields exist to protect what is being repaired. Now here is where this becomes practical and not just comforting. Silence is also the season where you are meant to reclaim energy that has been leaking out of you for years. And I want you to be honest with yourself about where those leaks are. You have been spending energy explaining yourself to people who never asked for an explanation. You have been spending energy defending decisions that God already confirmed in your spirit. You have been spending energy filling other people's silence with your own words because you were afraid of what they might be thinking. And you've been spending energy trying to read every reaction in every room instead of resting in the peace that was already given to you. Every one of those habits is a leak, and every leak drains the reservoir that God is trying to fill for the next season. So the silence is not just about God working on you, it is also about you learning to stop working against yourself. The next time you feel the urge to explain yourself to someone who did not earn that explanation, pause and ask one question. Am I sharing this because it is wise or because I am afraid? That single question will save you more energy than you realize. And the energy you save from unnecessary explanation is exactly the energy you will need for what God is preparing. Consider the image of an archer. Before the arrow flies its greatest distance, the bow must be pulled backward. That backward pull looks like regression. It looks like losing ground. It feels like tension with no payoff. But every archer knows that the backward motion is where all the force is stored. The further back the bow is drawn, the further the arrow travels. You are in the drawback right now. And I know it does not feel like progress. It feels like everything is moving in the wrong direction. But the tension you are carrying is not wasted. It is being converted into velocity for a release that has not happened yet. Here is what silence has already been teaching you, even if you have not named it yet. It has been teaching you to stop measuring your value by other people's words. When no one affirms you, you are forced to find affirmation in something deeper than human opinion. When no one explains their behavior toward you, you are forced to stop trying to control perceptions you were never meant to manage. When the room is quiet, you begin to notice things that noise always covered. You begin to see who approaches you with genuine intent versus who only appears when they need something from you. Silence strips the decoration off of every relationship and shows you the structure underneath. So do not rush to fill what God deliberately emptied. The silence around you right now is not a void. It is a clearing. God is removing noise so that when the right voice speaks, you hear it without interference. He's pulling you back so that when He releases you, the distance you cover will be greater than anything you could have achieved by pushing forward on your own strength. But reclaiming energy through silence is only the first move. The next step is harder and it requires more courage. You have to decide who gets to stand close to you and who does not, because not everyone who wants access to your life has earned the right to be there. Before you can protect your space from the wrong people, you have to protect your thinking from the wrong beliefs. And there is one belief that has been living inside most chosen ones for so long that it feels like truth, even though it was never true. The belief that setting boundaries is selfish. That saying no to someone makes you unloving, that protecting what God placed inside you somehow makes you less spiritual. I need you to understand where that belief actually came from. It did not come from God. It came from the people who benefited most when you had no boundaries at all. The ones who had unlimited access to your time, your energy, your emotional labor, and your peace. Of course, they taught you that boundaries were unkind. Your openness was their resource. Think about the last time you said yes to something when everything inside you was screaming no. Not a quiet hesitation, but a full internal resistance that you overrode because you did not want to disappoint someone or appear difficult. Now, ask yourself, honestly, who benefited from that? Yes. It was not you. And it was not the relationship either, because any relationship built on your reluctant compliance does not have a real foundation. It has a performance. And performances eventually end, usually with exhaustion on your side and confusion on theirs, because they never knew the real you. They only knew the version of you that could not say no. Here is the reframe that changes everything about how you think about boundaries. A boundary is not a wall you build to push people away. A boundary is an architectural line that defines where your construction ends and someone else's begins. Go back to the architect metaphor from earlier. If God is building something specific inside you, then boundaries are the site plan. They determine what belongs on this foundation and what does not. Without that plan, anyone can walk onto the construction site and start adding things that were never part of the original blueprint. Not because they are evil. Some of them genuinely want to help. But help that ignores the architect's design is not help. It is interference. And interference on a foundation that is still setting can cause cracks that take years to repair. Not every person in your life is wrong for you. But some people are wrong for this season. There are good people who carry energy that does not match what God is currently building in you. There are familiar people whose patterns would pull you back into a version of yourself that the architect is deliberately moving you past. Boundaries do not judge those people. Boundaries simply protect the integrity of the current phase. A construction site has fencing not because the neighborhood is dangerous, but because the work inside requires controlled conditions. Your life right now requires controlled conditions. And that is not isolation, that is stewardship of something sacred. I want to give you 3 questions to carry with you from this point forward. These are not rules, they are filters. And filters do not block everything. They simply separate what belongs from what does not. The first question is this: is this adding to what God is building, or is it disrupting the foundation? Not every opportunity that presents itself is an opportunity meant for you. Not every open door was opened by the architect. Some doors open because someone else wants access to what you carry. Learning to distinguish between the two is not paranoia. It is wisdom. The second question is this: am I saying yes because of calling or because of fear? There is a difference between agreeing to something because it aligns with your assignment and agreeing to something because you are afraid that refusing it will make you look bad or cost you approval. Fear-based yeses are the most expensive decisions you will ever make because they spend energy on construction that was never in your blueprint. The third question is this: if the architect was standing next to me right now, would this decision make sense in the context of what he is building? That question will not give you a perfect answer every time, but it will create a pause, and that pause is often the only distance you need between a reactive yes and a discerning no. Think about a construction crew pouring concrete. Before the pour, they build formwork, the temporary frame that holds the concrete in shape until it sets. Without formwork, the concrete spreads everywhere and never becomes anything structural. Boundaries in your mind are that formwork. They hold what God is pouring into you in the right shape until it is strong enough to stand on its own. Without mental boundaries, everything God deposits into you leaks into places it was never meant to go and hardens into shapes that do not match the blueprint. The first boundary is never about saying no to another person. The first boundary is saying yes to the design God drew for you and refusing every substitute blueprint, no matter how reasonable it looks from the outside. Once your mind is clear on that, the next step is learning where most of your energy actually escapes. And for most chosen ones, that place is not action, it is speech. There is a habit that most chosen ones carry without realizing how much it costs them. It looks like honesty. It feels like openness. Other people might even praise it as authenticity, but it is none of those things. It is over-explanation. And over-explanation is one of the most expensive energy leaks you will ever encounter because it disguises itself as virtue while quietly draining the very reservoir God is trying to fill inside you. You explain why you made a decision no one questioned. You share your plans with people who did not ask. You offer context for your silence, your absence, your boundaries, as though existing on your own terms requires a defense attorney. And every single time you do that, you hand a piece of your interior world to someone who may not have the capacity to hold it. There is an important difference between transparency and exposure that most people never learn. Transparency is selective. It is a deliberate choice to share specific information with someone who has proven they can steward it. Exposure is indiscriminate. It is pouring out your inner world to whoever happens to be standing nearby, not because they earned it, but because the silence between you felt uncomfortable and you filled it with the first thing available, which was your own story. Transparency builds trust because it is offered from strength. Exposure creates vulnerability because it is driven by fear. And the fear underneath most over-explanation is not complicated. It is the fear that if you do not explain yourself, people will misunderstand you. But here is what years of chosen life will eventually teach you. Some people were always going to misunderstand you. Your explanation was never going to change that. It only gave them more material to misunderstand. Think of your words as spiritual currency. Every time you speak about the vision God placed in you, you are spending something that carries real weight. In the financial world, no sane person hands cash to a stranger on the street and hopes they invest it wisely. But in the spiritual world, chosen ones do this constantly. They share their deepest calling with people who have no framework to understand it. They describe what God is building inside them to an audience that lacks the capacity to protect what they have been told. And then they wonder why the vision feels weaker after the conversation than it did before. It feels weaker because it was spent in the wrong place. Energy was transferred without return, and the account is lower than it was before you opened your mouth. God Himself modeled this principle, and it is recorded clearly in Scripture. After healing people, He sometimes told them to tell no one. Not because there was shame in the miracle, because there was a timing to its revelation. Some things need to be protected in silence until they are strong enough to withstand the weight of public opinion. Your vision is one of those things. Your calling is one of those things. The blueprint the architect is working from inside your life is one of those things. And sharing it prematurely does not accelerate the building. It exposes the foundation to weather before the walls are up. Here is a practical framework you can carry forward starting today. Think of your communication in 3 tiers. The first tier is surface, and it is available to everyone. This is basic interaction, politeness, general information that carries no spiritual weight. The second tier is selected, and it is reserved for people who have demonstrated over time that they can hold what you share without spreading it, distorting it, or using it against you. The key phrase there is over time, because one good conversation does not qualify someone for the second tier. Consistency qualifies them. The third tier is sacred, and it exists only between you and God. This tier contains the core vision, the deepest assignments, the parts of the blueprint that are still being drawn. This tier is not shared until God releases it, or until the structure is strong enough that no outside opinion can destabilize it. You do not owe third-tier access to someone who has only earned first-tier trust. And recognizing that distinction is not arrogance, it is resource management of the highest order. Think about a farmer who just planted seed. He does not invite the entire village to come watch the soil. Not because he is secretive, because the seed needs to be covered, not observed. It needs quiet pressure from the earth above it, not eyes looking down on it, expecting immediate results. Your vision operates the same way right now. It needs covering, not commentary. It needs time in the dark, not premature exposure to light that it is not ready to process. The strongest person in any room is never the one who talks the most. It is the one who knows exactly what does not need to be said. And that knowing is not something you perform. It is something you become as the architect builds restraint into your character, one silent season at a time. Now your mind is clear, your speech is governed. But there is a third layer of boundaries that requires the most courage of all, because it involves the people closest to you and the question of who actually gets to stand near what God is building. There is a pattern that many chosen ones have lived inside for so long that it feels like identity rather than habit. It is the pattern of open access. Anyone who needs something from you gets it. Anyone who asks a question receives a full answer. Anyone who wants closeness is granted entry without screening. From the outside, this looks like generosity and compassion. From the inside, if you are honest, it looks like a building with no gate. And a building with no gate is not welcoming. It is unprotected, because when there is no barrier to entry, everyone walks in, including people who did not come to build. They came to browse, they came to take, and some of them came simply because your open door was the easiest one on the street. Think about the last time you opened yourself fully to someone and shared something that mattered deeply to you, only to discover later that the information traveled to places you never intended. The immediate feeling was betrayal, but if you sit with it longer, the real issue was not their character, it was the access level. You gave someone a key to a room they had not proven they could be trusted inside. And that is not a judgment on who they are as a person. It is a recognition that trust is not a gift you hand out at the door. Trust is a credential that is earned through repeated evidence over time. God himself operates on access levels, and he never apologized for it. There were things he spoke to the multitudes on hillsides, general truths available to anyone willing to listen. There were things he only shared with the 12, a smaller circle with demonstrated commitment. And there were things he revealed only to 3, Peter, James, and John, on a mountaintop where no one else was invited. If the creator of the universe filters access to his plans, then you are not being cruel by doing the same. You are being consistent with the model he set. Access levels are not rankings of human value. They are rankings of demonstrated trustworthiness. There are people you love deeply who belong in the outer court of your life right now. Not because they failed, but because what God is building in you during this season requires conditions they cannot yet provide. And there are people you barely know who have quietly shown through their actions that they can hold weight without dropping it. Access is not about affection. It is about capacity. And confusing the two is how most chosen ones end up emotionally bankrupt, surrounded by people who genuinely care, but cannot carry what they have been given. Here is how you discern who has earned deeper access. First, they have held what you shared without spreading it. Not once, but repeatedly. Consistency over time is the only reliable evidence, because anyone can keep a secret once when they are trying to impress you. Second, they show up during your silence, not only during your celebration. The people who disappear when you are not producing, not performing, not radiating energy have told you everything you need to know about what they actually came for. Third, they respect boundaries without requiring an explanation. When you say not now, they do not guilt you, pressure you, or label you as distant. They understand that a closed door is not a rejection. It is a sign that something important is happening on the other side. I know this chapter is not easy to sit with, because it asks you to look at relationships you care about and ask a question that takes courage. Do I love this person, and does this person protect what God placed in me? Those are two separate questions, and sometimes the answer to the first is yes, while the answer to the second is not yet. That does not mean you cut them off. It means you adjust the access level to match the current evidence. Love without boundaries is not generosity. It is neglect of the sacred space that was entrusted to you. And the most loving thing you can do for the people around you is to protect the interior of your life so thoroughly that when the right person does step closer, there is still something whole and uncompromised for them to stand beside. Boundaries keep the foundation intact, but foundations are not built to sit empty. They are built to carry weight. And the weight you are being prepared to carry is not fragile. It is authority, real authority, the kind that does not announce itself, but shifts the atmosphere the moment it enters a room. There is a version of power that the world sells constantly, and it is loud, aggressive, and obsessed with being seen. It demands attention, controls rooms through volume, and measures itself by how many people comply. But that version of power has a shelf life because it depends entirely on external response. The moment the audience stops clapping, the power disappears. What God builds inside chosen ones is a completely different substance. It does not require applause to exist. It does not need validation to function. It operates the same way whether anyone is watching or not. And that consistency is precisely what makes it dangerous to every counterfeit structure it encounters. The architect has been building something inside you during every silent season, every unanswered prayer, every closed door that felt personal. He has been constructing self-regulation, not the kind that looks impressive on a productivity blog, the kind that holds your tongue when your emotions are screaming to react, the kind that keeps your posture steady when someone is deliberately trying to destabilize you, the kind that allows you to sit in a room full of chaos and remain the one still point that everything else orbits around. That is not passive behavior. That is strategic dominion over your own interior world. And it is the single most valuable asset you will ever carry into any room for the rest of your life. Now let me connect this directly to the areas where you need it most, because spiritual concepts that never touch practical ground are just poetry. In your work, self-regulation is the difference between being trusted with more responsibility and being overlooked for it. Picture a meeting where two people disagree and the tension escalates. One reacts, immediately raises their voice, interrupts, makes the argument personal. The other pauses, asks a precise question at the right moment, and waits for the room to find its center before speaking again. Both may have equal talent and equal ideas, but when a leadership position opens, it will not go to the loudest voice. It will go to the person who held the room together when the room was falling apart. That person is not lucky. That person was trained in silence by an architect who knew exactly what kind of pressure to apply and when. In your finances, self-regulation is the infrastructure beneath every wise decision you will ever make. It is the muscle that stops you from purchasing out of emotion, investing out of fear of missing out, or spending to fill an internal emptiness that money was never designed to reach. The discipline God has been forging in you through seasons of waiting and restraint is not just spiritual formation. It is the operating system for every significant financial decision in the next decade of your life. Chosen ones who learn to govern their impulses during the lean season become the ones who steward abundance correctly when it arrives. And abundance always arrives differently for those who were trained to hold it versus those who simply wanted to spend it. There is a concept I want you to carry from this moment forward, and it will change how you understand your own presence. It is the difference between gravity and performance. Some people work hard to be noticed when they enter a room. They adjust their energy, raise their volume, curate their appearance, all to create an impression. That is performance, and it requires constant energy output to maintain. Other people simply walk in and something shifts. Conversations adjust. Attention redirects. The atmosphere responds not to anything they did, but to something they carry. That is gravity. And gravity is never manufactured from the outside. It is accumulated from the inside through trial, silence, discipline, and sustained faithfulness to a process that nobody else could see. Every challenge you survived without public recognition added weight to your interior. Every time you chose correctly when no one was watching, your gravity increased. Every time you held your response instead of releasing your reaction, something inside you became denser, more concentrated, more undeniable. And that density is not something you need to announce. People feel it before you speak. They adjust their behavior in your presence without understanding why. That is not intimidation. That is the natural effect of someone carrying genuine substance in a world that is filled with surfaces. But gravity alone is not mastery. Gravity must be deployed at the right moment, and knowing when to move and when to remain still is the highest form of power the architect will ever teach you. There is a mistake that costs chosen ones more than almost any other, and it is not inaction. It is premature action, moving before the moment is ready, speaking before the room is prepared to receive it, launching before the foundation has cured. The world rewards speed and celebrates the person who moves first, but God operates on a completely different system. In his economy, the person who moves at the right time will always outperform the person who simply moved fastest. And learning to distinguish between urgency that comes from the spirit and urgency that comes from anxiety is one of the most critical skills the architect is installing in you during this season. Think about a farmer for a moment. A farmer does not plant whenever the mood strikes. There is a season for sowing and a season for waiting, and if those two are reversed, the entire harvest is lost. Plant too early and the frost kills the seed. Plant too late and the growing window closes before the crop matures. The farmer who produces the greatest yield is never the one who worked the hardest. It is the one who understood timing so precisely that every action landed in the exact window where it could multiply. What you are developing right now in this season of stillness is not patience for the sake of patience. You are developing timing intelligence, the ability to sense when conditions have aligned and to move with decisive clarity the moment they do. That skill is worth more than talent, more than connections, and more than capital because it determines whether all of those things produce anything lasting. Let me bring this directly into the territory where it matters most. In your career, timing is the invisible variable behind almost every major promotion, partnership, and breakthrough you have ever witnessed. Two people can present the same idea to the same decision maker and receive completely different responses based entirely on when the idea was presented. The person who reads the room and waits for the moment when their leader is receptive, focused, and open to change will hear yes more often than the person who rushes to speak because they are afraid the opportunity will disappear. Chosen ones are not being taught to wait because God wants them idle. They are being taught to read spiritual and practical seasons with the same precision a farmer reads weather. And that reading ability will separate you from everyone who operates on impulse for the rest of your professional life. In your finances, the principle of sacred timing carries equally devastating consequences when it is ignored and equally extraordinary results when it is honored. Consider two people who receive the same income during the same year. One immediately deploys every dollar into investments because the market looks exciting and everyone around them is moving aggressively. The other observes, studies, waits for clarity, and then acts when the signal is strong rather than when the noise is loud. 5 years later, the difference between their portfolios is not a matter of intelligence or even information. It is a matter of timing discipline. The one who waited did not wait out of fear, they waited out of pattern recognition. And pattern recognition is exactly what God has been developing in you through every season where He made you sit still while the world around you sprinted in circles. There is a deeper principle operating underneath all of this, and it is the difference between reaction and response. A reaction is instant, unfiltered, and driven by whatever emotion is loudest at the moment. It comes from the surface of who you are, the part of you that has not yet been processed through the architect's hands. A response is measured intentional and filtered through clarity before it reaches the outside world. It comes from the core of who you are becoming, the part of you that has been compressed by pressure and refined by silence until it operates from a fundamentally different center. Mastery is living more and more of your life in response mode rather than reaction mode. Not perfectly and not every time, because you are still human and there will be moments when old patterns surface. But the distance between your reactions and your responses is shrinking. And that shrinking gap is evidence of the architect's work, not your willpower alone. Anointed One, I want you to feel the weight of what has been built across these chapters. Your mind has been recalibrated to recognize foundational seasons for what they truly are. Your silence has become a tool for energy reclamation rather than a source of shame. Your boundaries now have 3 layers of intelligent protection around the sacred construction happening inside you. And your understanding of power has shifted from external noise to internal gravity deployed with precise timing. None of that happened by accident. Every chapter of this process was a room in the building, and you have walked through each one without turning back. But a building is not complete until it is positioned in the right location. A structure built with perfect materials and flawless craftsmanship still fails if it is placed on the wrong ground. The final question is not whether you have been built well. You have. The final question is where the architect intends to place you. And that answer is closer than you think, because the positioning has already begun, even if you have not yet recognized the signs. There is a difference between promotion and positioning that most people never learn, and it costs them years of misplaced expectation. Promotion is what the world offers. It is visible, sudden, and usually accompanied by applause. It looks like a title change, a public announcement, a moment where everyone can see that something shifted. Positioning is what God does. It is quiet, gradual, and almost invisible to anyone who is not paying close attention. It looks like a subtle change in who is calling you. A slow shift in the type of opportunities that cross your path. A quiet rearrangement of your circumstances that feels less like a breakthrough and more like pieces on a chessboard being moved into squares that will only make sense several moves from now. The most important move in chess is never the checkmate. It is the 5 moves before it, when the pieces were placed into positions that made the final move inevitable. During those 5 moves, nobody applauds. The opponent may not even notice, but the player who understands strategy knows the game was won in the quiet repositioning, not in the dramatic finish. Your life is in those 5 moves right now. Nothing about your current position looks like victory to the outside world. But the architect is not arranging your life for spectators. He is arranging it for legacy. And legacy is never built in the moves that people celebrate. It is built in the moves that people overlook. I want you to look back across everything that has been built in you through this message. The signal showed you that this season is foundational, not final. The architect revealed that your pressure has a designer behind it. Silence became a tool for reclaiming energy instead of a wound to nurse. 3 layers of boundaries now protect your mind, your speech, and your access points. And mastery taught you that true power is self-regulation deployed with precise timing. None of those were isolated lessons. Every single one was a positioning move. God was not just teaching you principles, He was moving you into place. Rearranging your interior so that when the exterior shifts, and it will shift, you are standing in the exact square where everything converges. Here is how you recognize that positioning is already active in your life right now. Small opportunities have started appearing that do not look impressive but feel strangely aligned, as though they were measured specifically for your current capacity. Relationships that once consumed your energy have begun to fade without dramatic conflict, as though someone is quietly clearing furniture from a room that needs to be reconfigured. You are reacting less and responding more. You are explaining yourself less and observing more. You are needing external validation less and operating from an internal steadiness that was not there 2 years ago. If you recognize even one of those signs, then the positioning is not coming. It has already started. You are not waiting for the shift. You are inside the shift, and it has been moving around you so gradually that you mistook it for stillness. Do not wait for the dramatic moment. The dramatic moment is a product of invisible preparation, and invisible preparation is exactly what you have been living through. The building is nearly complete. The location has been selected. What remains now is the final alignment between who you have become on the inside and what is about to manifest on the outside. And that alignment does not require your effort. It requires your trust. Because the architect who designed every room in this structure also chose the exact coordinates where it will stand. Everything you have heard today circles back to one truth. And I want you to let it settle somewhere deeper than your mind, somewhere in the part of you that knows things before it can explain them. God's message for you right now is not final. It is foundational. And that single distinction, once it takes root, will change how you carry every difficult day. Between now and the moment everything becomes visible, you are not at the end. You are at the base. And the base is the only part of any structure that touches everything built above it. Nothing rises without it. Nothing stands without it. Nothing lasts without it. What you are living through right now is not a chapter you will want to skip when you look back. It is the chapter that made every other chapter possible. I want to leave you with something you can carry beyond this moment. Not a formula, not a prediction, a declaration that comes from the identity the architect has been forming in you through every season we have walked through together today. You are not the victim of your circumstances. You are the project of a builder who does not make mistakes. Silence was never abandonment. It was the surgical environment for the most precise work of your life. Boundaries are not selfishness. They are the architectural lines that protect what is sacred from what is careless. Mastery is not perfection. It is the growing ability to choose response over reaction timing, over impulse gravity, over performance. And your position right now, the one that looks like waiting to everyone else, is the exact coordinate the architect selected before you were ever aware that a building was being constructed. Chosen one, there is a particular kind of peace that arrives not when your circumstances change, but when your understanding of your circumstances finally matches reality. That peace is available to you right now. Not because I said something clever, because something in your spirit recognized a truth today that it has been carrying without language for a long time. Maybe it was one sentence. Maybe it was one image. Maybe it was a single phrase that made you pause and think, that is exactly what I have been feeling but could not name. Whatever it was, it is yours. Hold it close. Return to it when the noise of the world tries to convince you that foundational seasons are failures. They are not failures. They are the most expensive investment God makes in a human life. And He does not invest at that level in someone He plans to abandon. You do not need to understand the full blueprint today. You do not need to see the top floor from the basement. You only need to trust that the hands shaping your life right now are the same hands that measured the oceans and positioned the stars. And those hands have never once been careless with what they chose to build. Walk forward in that knowing. Step into tomorrow, carrying the weight of everything the season has deposited inside you. Not as burden, but as ballast, the kind that keeps a ship steady in open water when lesser vessels are tossed by every wave. You were built for depth, not decoration. For substance, not speed. For positioning that outlasts every temporary arrangement the world calls success. This is your foundation, and everything rises from here. If what was spoken today laid something new inside your spirit, leave a word below. Not for me, for you. A quiet marker that on this day you heard something true and you chose to stand on it. If someone in your life is walking through their own foundational season and needs to hear that it is not the end, send this to them. Sometimes a single message arriving at the right moment changes the entire trajectory. And if you want to continue walking this road, stay close. Come back. We walk this together, in peace, in authority, on ground that was measured by the architect himself.